Mr. Clerk, please record.
There's quorum present, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Are there any corrections for the journal?
There are no corrections this morning, sir.
Thank you. Are there any messages, reports, or announcements?
There are, Mr. President. Reference report from the Referencing Committee concerning legislative bills 338 through 420 and LR 21 as referenced. An report from the Executive Board concerning appointments to the Economic Recovery Special Committee. Notice of committee hearings from the Agriculture Committee. And a notification from the Urban Affairs Committee informing legislature that Senator Hunt has been selected as vice chairwoman of the committee. Finally, Mr. President, an announcement. The Building Maintenance Committee will meet under the North Balcony in exec session at 10:30. Building and Maintenance, North Balcony, 10:30. That's all I have this time, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senator Albright would like to recognize Dr. Dave Holting of Pender, Nebraska, who's serving as the family physician of the day. Senators, please welcome Dr. Holting. While the legislature is in session and capable of transacting business, I propose to sign and do hereby sign legislative resolutions 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15, and 16. Mr. Clerk, for new bills.
Thank you, Mr. President. Legislative Bill 465, offered by Senator Moser. It's a bill for an act relating to motor vehicles to change the allocation of fees for operator license and state identification cards as prescribed, provide an operative date, and declare an emergency. 466 by Senator DeBoer. It's a bill for an act relating to civil procedure, change provision relating to the guarantee of garnishment summons, continued liens, notice upon corporate garnishees to define terms, repeal original sections. 467 by Senator DeBoer. It's a bill for an act relating to the Critical Incident Stress Management Act to require state correctional employees to complete mental health training as prescribed, repeal the original sections. 468 by Senator DeBoer. It's a bill for an act related to the Department of Health and Human Services to create the position of State Dementia Director and repeal the original sections. 469 by Senator Cowett. It's a bill for an act relating to state personnel to include parole officers and probation officers as part of the Protective Service Bargaining Unit and repeal original sections. 470 by Senator McDonald. It's a bill for an act relating to Health and Human Services, the state intent regarding an increase in rates for child welfare aid and declare an emergency. 471, Senator Geist. It's a bill for an act relating to public health and welfare, provide for regulation of registered interior designers under the Engineers and Architects Regulation Act, to rename the act, provide and change definitions, to rename the Board of Engineers and Architects, change provision relating to powers, duties, and membership, rename fund, to create a voluntary registry for interior designers, harmonize provisions, and repeal the original sections. 472 by Senator Geist. It's a bill for an act relating to civil actions, change provision relating to admissibility of evidence and occupant protection system, three-point safety belt system, repeal original sections. 473 by Senator Geist. It's a bill for an act relating to juveniles, provide duties for the Commission on Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice to define terms, the state intent regarding appropriations. 474 by Senator Wayne. It's a bill for an act relating to the State Historical Society to provide duties relating to the Mayhew Cabin and Fort Robinson historical sites to state intent regarding funding. 475 by Senator Wayne. It's a bill for an act relating to school funding to adopt the Nebraska Education Formula, terminate the Tax Equity and Educational Opportunity Support Act, and repeal the original sections. 476 by Senator Wayne. Bill for an act relating to investment by public entities to adopt the Public Entities Investment Trust Act. 477 by Senator Wayne, a bill for an act relating to appropriations to appropriate funds to the Omaha Streetcar Authority to state intent regarding disbursement of funds, declare an emergency. 478 by Senator Wayne. It's a bill for an act relating to juveniles, change provision relating to education programs in state institutions that house juveniles, provide a termination date, provide for powers and duties for the State Department of Education and the State Board of Education, harmonize provisions, repeal original sections. 479 by Senator Wayne. It's a bill for an act relating to the administration of justice to transfer the Office of Probation Administration from the judicial branch to the executive branch, provide for the appointment of a probation administrator to provide for duties for the Office of Inspector General of Nebraska Child Welfare, to rename the Division of Parole Supervision Agency, to eliminate obsolete provisions and repeal the original sections. 480 by Senator Holdcroft. It's a bill for enacting medical liens to provide for a lien to providers of emergency medical services and to repeal the original sections. 481 by Senator Raybold, the bill for enacting the housing incentives to adopt the Housing Incentive District Act. Mr. President, that's all I have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Mr. Clerk with additional new bills.
Thank you, Mr. President. 482 offered by Senator Raybold. It's a bill for an act relating to firearms to adopt the Suicide Risk Protection Order Act to harmonize provisions and to repeal original sections. 483 by Senator Raybold. It's a bill for an act relating to the investment of public funds to add credit unions to the definition of a qualified mutual financial institution and redefine terms, harmonize provisions, repeal original sections. 484 by Senator Moser. It's a bill for an act relating to the Motor Vehicle Industry Regulation Act to authorize conducting an educational seminar for continuing education credit as prescribed to eliminate a requirement for the Motor Vehicle Industry Licensing Board to maintain an office in the Capitol, to harmonize provisions, provide operative dates, and to repeal the original sections. 485 by Senator Hunt. It's a bill for an act relating to state contracts for services, provide for applicability of provisions to certain state constitutional officers, and repeal original sections. 486 by Senator Hunt. A bill for an act relating to state officers to change the prohibition on use of state funds for advertising or promotional materials as prescribed and to repeal original sections. 487 by Senator Hunt. It's a bill for an act relating to schools to prohibit any school in Nebraska receiving public funds from discriminating as prescribed. 488 by Senator Hunt. It's a bill for an act relating to sexual assault to adopt the Sexual Assault Emergency Care Act to provide severability. 489 by Senator Von Gillern. It's a bill for an act relating to employment security law to amend section 48604 to provide that employment does not include service by a marketplace network contractor for a marketplace network platform. Define terms, repeal original sections. 490 by Senator Von Gillern. It's a bill for an act relating to appropriations to appropriate federal funds to the Department of Health and Human Services for health aid, declare an emergency. 491 by Senator Von Gellern. That's a bill for enactment of the Nebraska Advantage Research and Development Act, change provision relating to claiming tax credits and to repeal original sections. 492 by Senator Von Gellern, bill for enactment of revenue and taxation to allow income tax deductions for the cost of certain property and for certain research experimental expenditures as prescribed, harmonized provision, repeal original sections. 493 by Senator Duncan. It's a bill for enactment of the State Lottery Act to remove the prohibition that a lottery ticket cannot be sold through a vending or dispensing device and to repeal original sections. 494 by Senator Duncan. It's a bill for enactment of the Nebraska evidence rules to change relating the business records hearsay exception, provide additional self-authenticating items of evidence, and repeal original sections. 495 by Senator Breezy. It's a bill for enactment of the Nebraska Educational Savings Plan Trust to redefine term and to repeal original sections. 496 by Senator Linehan. Bill for enactment of revenue and taxation to provide a sales and use tax exemption for business inputs, define a term, to harmonize provision, provide an operative date, and repeal original section. That's all I have at this time, Mr. President.
Recognize Senator Halloran with a message.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. If you're wondering why we distributed the maps of the districts and the respective senators and then subsequently have picked them back up, I have an admission of neglect that I don't usually give when I fall into that. But we did neglect to have one senator's photo listed on there, so we have to redo it. I was going to suggest we have a little, find Waldo and see if you could find which one it was. I will not say which one it was, but we are going to redo that and redistribute them. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Introduction of bills, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. LB 497 by Senator Linehan. It's a bill for enacting relating revenue and taxation, change provision relating to itemized deductions, repeal original sections, declare an emergency. 498 by Senator Linehan, a bill for enacting relating revenue and taxation to provide a sales tax credit for certain franchise fees paid, define terms, harmonize provisions, provide an operative date, repeal original sections, declare an emergency. 499 by Senator Michaela Cavanaugh. It's a bill for enacting relating to the School Readiness Tax Credit Act, change provision relating to the availability of tax credits to harmonize provision, repeal original sections. 500 by Senator Michaela Cavanaugh. It's a bill for enacting relating to public assistance to eliminate a requirement relating to Medicaid waiver, change a reporting requirement, change a requirement relating to independent evaluation family support program, and repeal original sections. 501 by Senator Michaela Cavanaugh. It's a bill for enacting relating to the Workers' Compensation Act, provide for compensability of certain cancers and firefighters to create rebuttable presumptions, define terms to harmonize provision, repeal original sections. 502 by Senator Michaela Cavanaugh is a bill for enacting relating to labor to adopt the Warehouse Worker Protection Act to provide severability. 503 by Senator Aguilar. It's a bill for enacting relating to nursing to adopt the Rural Nebraska Nursing Workforce Act. 504 by Senator Aguilar. It's a bill for enacting relating to appropriations to state legislative intent to transfer and appropriate funds for workforce housing and to declare an emergency. LB 505 by Senator Bostar. It's a bill for enacting relating to motor fuels to change and provide alternative fuel fees, to change and provision excise fees as prescribed, to add requirements relating to commercial electric vehicle charging stations, provide powers of electrical suppliers, provide a sales and use tax exemption, harmonize provisions, repeal an original section. 506 by Senator Bostar. It's a bill for enacting relating to appropriations to appropriate federal funds to the Department of Natural Resources, appropriate federal funds to the Department of Environment and Energy, and declare an emergency. 507 by Senator Conrad, a bill for enacting relating to juveniles to change the jurisdiction of juvenile courts as prescribed, change provision and terminology relating to truancy, to eliminate obsolete language, change provision relating to funding and compulsory education, add authority for rules and regulations to harmonize provisions, repeal original sections. 508 by Senator Conrad, a bill for enacting relating to appropriations to appropriate funds to the Supreme Court for the Office of Dispute Resolution to state intent, declare an emergency. 509, Senator Conrad, a bill for enacting relating to child welfare services, provide for a reimbursement rate for an increase in rates for a decrease in revenue for providers as prescribed. 510 by Senator Conrad. It's a bill for enacting relating to child welfare to require the legislature and the Department of Health and Human Services to include a cost of living adjustment in certain contacts as prescribed. 511 by Senator Brewer. It's a bill for enacting relating to appropriations to appropriate funds from the general fund for the Department of Administrative Services and declare an emergency. 512 by Senator Brewer. It's a bill for enacting the Liquor Control Act to extend the number of locations allowed for craft brewery or micro distiller licensee to harmonize provision, repeal original sections. 513 by Senator Brewer. It's change proof of publication requirements for legal notices, change published notice provisions, and virtual conferencing requirements under the Open Meetings Act as prescribed and declare an emergency. 514 by Senator Brewer. It's a bill for enacting relating to elections to change provision relating remonstrance petition, change provision of the Municipal Initiative and Referendum Act, define a term, change provision under the Election Act relating to voter registration, duties of political subdivisions, candidate filings, name changes, notices, ballots, secure drop boxes, recall procedures, provide a penalty for false swearing, harmonize provisions, and repeal the original sections. 515 by Senator Walls, a bill for an act related to economic development to adopt the Rural Economic Development Initiative Act. 516 by Senator Walls. It's a bill for an act relating to schools, providing duty for the Commissioner of Education and the State School Security Director to provide grants to school district for security-related infrastructure projects, provide grants to educational service units, local public health departments to hire school psychologists, licensed mental health practitioners, prescribed to harmonize provisions, repeal original sections. 517. Offered by Senator Walls is a bill for an act related to the Healthcare Facility Licensure Act to require the Department of Health and Human Services to pay discharge incentives for post-acute placement facilities as prescribed and repeal original sections. 518 by Senator Walls, a bill for an act related to school funding to adopt the Reducing Education Risk Factors and Property Tax Relief Act, change the distribution of certain tax proceeds, define terms, provide certain aid, create a fund under the Tax Equity and Educational Opportunity Support Act, and repeal the original sections. 519 by Senator Walls, a bill for an act related to education to eliminate certification fees for churches and certificates as prescribed, to create, change, and terminate funds, to state intent regarding an appropriation, change for the Excellent Teaching Act to adopt the Student Teaching Assistance Act, harmonize provisions, repeal the original sections. 520 by Senator Walls, a bill for an act related to education, change provision related to high school graduation requirements and academic content standards, change provision related to Computer Science and Technology Education Act, harmonize provisions, repeal the original sections. 521 by Senator Walls, a bill for an act relating to the Uniform Controlled Substances Act, change provision relating to immunity for administering Naxalone, and repeal the original sections. 522 by Senator Walls is a bill for an act related to the Tax Equity and Educational Opportunity Support Act, change provision relating to poverty allowances, repeal the original sections. 523 by Senator Walls, a bill for an act related to the Medical Assistance Act to require submission of a state plan amendment to include school psychologists and providers and to repeal the original sections. Mr. President, that's all I have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Senators, cookies are being handed out in honor of Senator Michaela Kavanaugh's birthday, which is today, and Senator McDonald's birthday, which was yesterday. Mr. Clerk, introduction of new bills.
Thank you, Mr. President. LB 524 by Senator Frederickson. It's a bill for enacting revenue taxation, providing income tax credit for food donations as prescribed. 525, Senator Frederickson. It's a bill for enacting appropriations, state legislative intent to appropriate funds from the general fund of the Department of Health and Human Services for rate increases and declare an emergency. 526, Senator Frederickson, the bill for enacting appropriations to state intent regarding appropriations to the Department of Health and Human Services, declare an emergency. 527 by Senator Frederickson, the bill for enacting to schools, provide requirements for mental health expenditures, state intent for appropriations, change provision related to local system formula resources to harmonize provisions and repeal original sections. 528 by Senator Ben Hansen. It's a bill for enacting to education to create the Nebraska Option Enrollment Tuition Account Program to harmonize provisions, repeal original sections, declare an emergency. 529 by Senator Ben Hansen. It's a bill for enacting the Property Tax Request Act to redefine terms, change provision related to joint public hearings for property tax request increases more than the allowable growth percentage and repeal original sections. 530 by Senator McKinney. It's a bill for enacting the Nebraska Housing Agency Act, change provision relating to the selection qualification terms, conflicts of interest of certain commissioners, change provision relating to selection and removal of certain executive directors of local housing agencies, harmonize provisions and repeal original sections. 531 by Senator McKinney. It's a bill for an act to change provision relating to economic recovery incentives division of the Department of Economic Development, the qualified census tract recovery grant program, the economic recovery contingency fund to eliminate an obsolete provision, provide for credit and investment earnings, change restrictions on the use of intended appropriations, harmonize provision, repeal original sections, declare an emergency. 532 by Senator McKinney. It's a bill for enacting community development law to authorize guidelines for the consideration and approval of certain redevelopment projects, change certain reporting requirements, change provision related to the construction of workforce housing, provide for removal of substandard and blighted area designations and extremely blighted area designations, provide requirements for the approval of redevelopment plans and redevelopment projects to harmonize provisions, repeal original section. 533 by Senator McKinney. It's a bill for enacting cities and villages to change the public board membership for cities of the primary class. State that the city or village without a plumbing board may still require the licensure of plumbers and repeal original sections. 534 by Senator Slama. It's a bill for enacting appropriations to appropriate federal funds to the Department of Environment and Energy and declare an emergency. 535 by Senator Slama. It's a bill for enacting the government to require valid photographic identification for voting purposes, change provision relating to election confidential information, to eliminate the fee for certain state identification cards and certified copies of birth certificates to harmonize provision, provide operative dates to repeal the original sections, declare an emergency. 536 by Senator Slama. It's a bill for enacting insurance, change relating to investment by insurers in preferred and common stock, repeal original sections. 537 by Senator Slama. It's a bill for enacting the Nebraska Uniform Limited Liability Company Act to change provision relating to publication, notice of organization, amendments, certificates of organization, merger, conversion, investigation, dissolution, and repeal original section. 538 by Senator Slama. It's a bill for enacting relating to banks, change provision relating to notification of a vacancy of the board of directors of a bank in the Department of Banking and Finance, and to repeal the original sections. 539, Senator Vargas. The bill for enacting the Tobacco Prevention and Control Program, the state legislative intent to appropriate money, repeal the original sections. 540 by Senator Vargas. It's a bill for enacting public lettings to require public candidates to notify bidders of certain requirements and provide for enforcement of the requirements as prescribed. 541 by Senator Lowe. It's a bill for enacting election, provide for nomination, election of a board of directors of a public power district or public power and irrigation district on a partisan ballot. 542 by Senator Lowe. It's a bill for an act relating to the Nebraska Racetrack Gaming Act, change terminology and repeal original sections. 543 by Senator Lowe. It's a bill for enacting of the Nebraska Electric Control Act to remove redundant language relating to entertainment district licenses. 544 by Senator Conrad. It's a bill for enacting of the Nebraska Bingo Act to redefine terms relating to how bingo is played using technological aids, repeal original sections. 545 by Senator Conrad is a bill for enacting the Uniform Residential Landlord and Tenant Act, change provision relating restitution and repeal the original sections. 546 by Senator Conrad, it's a bill for enacting the bed and breakfast establishments to redefine and change provisions of the Nebraska Pure Food Act regarding bed and breakfast establishments, require the state fire code to include provisions relating to bed and breakfast establishments as prescribed and repeal the original section. 547 by Senator Conrad, a bill for enactment of the State Capital Preservation Act to create the Capital Preservation, Restoration, Enhancement Endowment Fund, eliminate obsolete provision, harmonize provision, and repeal original sections. 548 by Senator Ballard, a bill for enactment of Pharmacy Practice Act, changing the examination requirement for licensure of pharmacists, change compounding standard person authorized to compound, repeal original sections. 549 by Senator Ballard, it's a bill for enactment protection of person and property, change provision related to healthcare powers of attorney, the Nebraska Uniform Trust Code, Nebraska Uniform Power of Attorney Act, and to repeal the original sections. Mr. President, that's all I have at this time.
Senators, last call for bill introduction. Mr. Clerk, new bills.
Thank you, Mr. President. LB 550, Senator Ballard, a bill for enacting relating to schools, change and eliminate definitions and provision relating to enrollment option program to eliminate obsolete provisions, harmonize provisions, to repeal original sections. 551, Senator John Kavanaugh. It's a bill for enacting relating to appropriations to state legislative intent for appropriations, declare an emergency. 552, Senator John Kavanaugh, a bill for enacting legislative mental health care capacity strategic planning committee, change contracting and reporting requirements, to change termination date, and to repeal original sections. 553, Senator John Kavanaugh, it's a bill for enacting relating to criminal procedure to provide for automatic renewal of bail and conditions of release cases involving a misdemeanor or a violation of a city or village ordinance, and repeal original sections. 554, Senator John Kavanaugh, it's a bill for enacting relating to appropriations to appropriate funds for the general fund for the Commission on Public Advocacy. 555 by Senator John Kavanaugh, it's a bill for enacting relating to the Commission on Public Advocacy, change funding provisions to eliminate obsolete provisions, repeal original sections. 556 by Senator Brand, a bill for enacting relating to energy assistance to adopt the Capacity Grant Act, declare an emergency. 557, Senator Vargas, that's a bill for enacting relating to treatment and corrections, provide, change, and eliminate definitions, change provision relating to restrictive housing and solitary confinement, repeal original section. 558 by Senator Day, it's a bill for enacting relating to schools, set a minimum wage for employees of school districts. 559 by Senator Blood, bill for enacting relating to political accountability and disclosure to require an elected official of a city of first class to file a statement of financial interest, provide for electronic filing of statements of financial interest, repeal original sections. 560 by Senator Blood, a bill for enacting relating to energy, the state intent to seek funds from the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. 561 by Senator Blood, a bill for enacting relating to public health to adopt the Cosmetology Licensure Act to define terms, harmonize provisions, repeal original sections. 562 by Senator Dorn. It's a bill for an act relating to ethanol to adopt the E15 Access Standard Act, change provision related to a grant program, and repeal original sections. 563 by Senator Dorn, a bill for an act relating to appropriations to appropriate funds for the State Historical Society to state intent regarding future appropriation. 564 by Senator Dorn, Bill for enacting the Transportation Innovation Act, change provisions of the Economic Opportunity Program relating to the limits on program expenditures and program purposes to eliminate obsolete provisions and repeal the original sections. 565 by Senator Bostelman, a bill for enacting the hydrogen hubs. The state intent regarding appropriations, provide for a grant program as prescribed, provide duties and powers for the Department of Economic Development to harmonize provisions, repeal the original sections, declare an emergency. 566, Senator Bostelman. It's a bill for enacting natural resources to require a study and report of the Natural Resources Committee of the Legislature to the economic impacts and risk of intermittent renewable energy generation in Nebraska, declare an emergency. 567 by Senator Bostelman. It's a bill for enacting the power districts to change the qualifications to be eligible to serve as a member of the Board of Directors of a Public Power and Irrigation District, change the provision relating to state policy, define terms, to change the requirements for an annual report as prescribed, harmonize provisions, repeal original sections. 568 by Senator Bostelman. It's a bill for enacting relating to energy to adopt the Nuclear and Hydrogen Development Act. That's all I have at this time, Mr. President.
Bill introduction, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. Legislative Bill 569, introduced by Senator Boscom, is a bill for enacting the county government, prohibits financial interest by certain county officers and immediate family members relating to electric generation facilities as prescribed, provides an exception, declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 570, introduced by Senator Vargas and others, is a bill for enacting the public health, adopts the Overdose Fatality Review Teams Act, provides severability, and declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 571, introduced by Senator Lippincott, is a bill for enacting new appropriations, appropriates funds of the Department of Environment and Energy to aid in the carrying out of the provisions of the Water Well Standards Contractors Practice Act, and declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 572, introduced by Senator Repe, is a bill for enacting the Medical Nutrition Therapy Practice Act, amends several sections within Chapter 38, provides changes and eliminates definitions, restates intent, changes memberships on a board, provides and changes licensure requirements, change provisions regarding scope of practice, harmonized provisions, repeals the original section, outright repeals sections 38, 1804. Legislative Bill 573, introduced by Senator Ben Hansen and others, bill for an act relating to appropriations, appropriates funds of the Department of Economic Development. Legislative Bill 574, introduced by Senator Kauth and others, bill for an act relating to public health and welfare, amends sections 38, 17.9, adopts the Let Them Grow Act, harmonized provisions, provide an operative date, provides severability, and repeals the original sections. Legislative Bill 575, introduced by Senator Kauth and others, bill for an act relating to schools, adopts the Sports and Spaces Act, provides an operative date, provides severability, and declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 576, introduced by Senator John Kavanaugh and others, bill for an act relating to land management burning, amends sections 81, 52003, provides limitations on liability and nuisance related to land management burning, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 577, introduced by Senator John Kavanaugh. This bill for an act relating to revenue taxation, amend several sections within Chapter 77, change provision related to notification of delinquent property tax and issuance of treasurer's tax deeds, provides an operative date, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 578, introduced by Senator DeBoer and others, bill for an act relating to appropriations, states legislative intent to appropriate funds to the Auditor of Public Accounts and declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 579, introduced by Senator DeBoer, is a bill for an act relating to Nebraska Uniform Real Property Transfer on Death Act, amends section 763401, 763410, change provision related to required warnings on transfer of death deeds and insurance policies of certain real property, harmonized provisions, repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 580, introduced by Senator Holcroft and others, is a bill for an act relating to assessment of property, amends section 77, 1344, and 1347, change provision related to the special valuation of agriculture or horticultural land, repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 581, introduced by Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, is a bill for an act relating to public health, requires the Office of Juvenile Services and Department of Correctional Services to create a pilot program for dual services as prescribed and defines terms. Legislative Bill 582, introduced by Senator Mosier, is a bill for an act relating to economic development, adopts the Manufacturing Modernization Pilot Investment Act, declares emergency. Legislative Bill 583, introduced by Senator Sanders at the request of the governor. It's a bill for an act relating to education, amends several sections within Chapter 79, provides for foundation aid and special education supplemental aid under the Tax Equity and Educational Opportunities Support Act, harmonized provisions, repeals the original section, declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 584 is by Senator Hughes and others, a bill for an act relating to revenue and taxation, imposes a tax on electronic nicotine delivery systems, provides for rules and regulations, and declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 584, introduced by Senator Hughes, is a bill for an act relating to schools, amends Section 79.146 and 144. Change the duty of the state school security director, requires behavioral and mental health training for certain school personnel, harmonized provisions, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 586, introduced by Senator Hughes and others, is a bill for an act relating to the Nebraska Center for Nursing, amends several sections within Chapter 71, states intent regarding appropriations, provides for expending clinical training sites for nurses, and the repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 587, introduced by Senator Wishart, is a bill for an act relating to insurance, adopts the Insurance Regulatory Sandbox Act. Legislative Bill 588, introduced by Senator Wishart, is a bill for an act relating to cannabis, amends several sections, adopts the Medical Cannabis Act, provides civil and criminal penalties, creates a fund, change provision relating to controlled substances, open containers, the prescription drug monitoring system, and taxation, harmonized provision, provides an operative date, repeals the original section, declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 589 is by Senator Breezy at the request of the governor, is a bill for an act relating to revenue and taxation, amends section 77, 16, 32, and 33, adopts the School District Property Tax Limitation Act, harmonized provisions, provides an operative date, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 590, introduced by Senator Holcroft and others, is a bill for an act relating to public assistance, amends section 68-100601, changes personal needs allowance for aged, blind, and disabled persons, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 591, issued by Senator Hardin and others, bill for an act relating to agricultural leases, requires no determination of an oral lease of land for agricultural purposes to be given as prescribed. Legislative Bill 592, introduced by Senator Hardin, is bill for an act relating to privacy, adopts the Social Care Information Privacy Act. Legislative Bill 593, introduced by Senator Hardin, is a bill for an act relating to hearing instrument specialists, amend several sections in Chapter 38, defines terms, change provisions relating to licensure and regulation of hearing instrument specialists, harmonize provisions, and repeals the original section. That's all I have this time, Mr. President.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. President, Senator Conrad would move to adjourn the body. Sine die.
Senator Conrad, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, I'd ask for a point of order, and I'd ask for a voice vote on the motion pending.
Request to place the House under call. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed vote nay. It is a machine vote. Record, Mr. Clerk, it's a simple majority.
9 ayes, 3 nays, place House under call.
The House is under call. Members, please return your desk. The House is under call. Please check in. Those not authorized, please leave the floor. Senator Raybold, Day, Albright, please return to the chamber. Senator Wishart, Kauf, Frederickson, Armendariz, McKinney, please return to the chamber. Senators Vargas, Linehan, Dover, Bostar, Clemens, Holleran, Bostelman, McDonald, Hughes, Lowe, Wayne, Erdman, Reapy, Dungan, Sanders, Geist, Hanson, Arch, John Kavanaugh, Von Gillern, Aguilar, please return to chambers. The House is under call. Senator Armendariz, would you check in, please? Thank you. The House is under call. Senator Albrecht, Wishart, Kauth, Dover, Erdman, Arch, and John Kavanaugh, please report and check in. Senator Ballard, we're missing Senators Wishart, Kauth, Dover, Erdman, Arch, and John Kavanaugh. How do you wish to proceed? Request for roll call in regular order. The motion before the body is to adjourn sine die. Mr. Clerk, call the vote.
Senator Aguilar, voting no. Senator Albright, voting no. Senator Arch. Senator Armendariz, voting no. Senator Ballard, voting no. Senator Blood, voting yes. Senator Bostar, voting no. Senator Bostelman, voting no. Senator Brandt, voting no. Senator Brewer, voting no. Senator Breezy, voting no. Senator John Kavanaugh, Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, voting yes. Senator Clements, voting no. Senator Conrad, voting yes. Senator Day, voting yes. Senator DeBoer, voting no. Senator DeKay, voting no. Senator Dorn, Senator Dover, Senator Dungan, voting no. Senator Erdman, Senator Frederickson, voting no. Senator Geist, voting no. Senator Holleran, voting no. Senator Hansen, voting no. Senator Hardin, voting no. Senator Holdcroft, voting no. Senator Hughes, voting no. Senator Hunt, voting yes. Senator Ibach, voting no. Senator Jacobson, Senator Kauth, Senator Linehan, voting no. Senator Lippincott, voting no. Senator Lowe, voting no. Senator McDonald, voting no. Senator McKinney, voting no. Senator Mosier, voting no. Senator Merman, voting no. Senator Raybold, voting yes. Senator Reapy, voting no. Senator Sanders, voting no. Senator Slama, Senator Vargas, voting no. Senator Von Gillern, voting no. Senator Walls, voting no. Senator Wayne, voting yes. Senator Wishart. Vote is 7 ayes, 33 nays, Mr. President, to adjourn sine die.
The motion fails. New bills, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. New bills. Legislative Bill 594, introduced by Senator Hardin, is a bill for an act relating to political subdivisions. Provides for investment in commercial paper by local government investment pools. Legislative Bill 595, introduced by Senator Hardin, is a bill for an act relating to the Pharmacy Practice Act. Amends sections 38, 28, 601. Changes the number of pharmacy interns and pharmacy technicians supervised by a pharmacist, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 596, introduced by Senator Hardin, is a bill for an act related to the Nebraska Liquor Control Act. Amends several sections within Chapter 53, authorizes the manufacturer of a wholesaler or an agent of a manufacturer or wholesaler to enter into a sponsorship or advertising agreement with certain licensees or organizations as prescribed. Harmonized provisions repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 597, introduced by Senator Clements, is a bill for an act relating to appropriations. Appropriates funds to the Legislative Council and declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 598, introduced by Senator Clements, is a bill for an act relating to the Cash Reserve Fund. Amends several sections. Section 84.612 eliminates obsolete provisions, repeals the original section, declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 599, introduced by Senator Armendariz, the bill for an act relating to recycling. Amends several sections within chapters 13 and 81. Defines and redefines terms, change provisions relating to regulatory authority over advanced recycling facilities. Under the Integrated Solid Waste Management Act, defines, redefines, and alphabetizes terms under the Environmental Protection Act. Provides capital assistance for establishing advanced recycling facilities from the Waste Reduction and Recycling Incentive Act. Harmonized provision repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 600, introduced by Senator Lippincott and others, a bill for an act relating to Transportation Innovation Act. Amends several sections within Chapter 39, change provisions relating to Transportation Infrastructure Bank Fund. changes provisions relating to the purpose of the Economic Opportunity Program, eliminates an obsolete provision, harmonized provision, repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 601, introduced by Senator Dungan, is bill for enacting appropriations. States intent regarding development disability aid and declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 602, introduced by Senator Linehan, is bill for enacting income taxes. Amend Section 772716, excludes certain pensions and annuities from income taxes, defines terms, limits deductions as prescribed, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 603, introduced by Senator Linehan, is bill for an act relating to education. Amend several sections within Chapter 79, change provisions relating to Alternative Certification for Quality Teachers Act, authorizes the Commissioner of Education to issue alternative certificates to teach as prescribed, redefines term, harmonized provision, repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 604, introduced by Senator Raybold, is bill for an act relating to elections. Amend several sections within Chapter 32, change provisions relating to voting early, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 605, introduced by Senator Albright, is bill for an act relating to Uniform Credentialing Act. Amend several sections within Chapter 38, change provisions of the Mental Health Practice Act to include protections and requirements for certified ACT therapists, defines terms, changes the membership of the Board of Mental Health Practice, provides powers and duties of the Board of Mental Health Practice, harmonized provisions, provides an operative date, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 606, introduced by Senator Albright, is a bill for an act relating to revenue and taxation. Amend several sections within Chapter 77, adopts the Nebraska Pregnancy Help Act, provides for tax credits, harmonized provisions, provides an operative date, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 607, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to Public Service Commission. Amends Section 751101, eliminates a provision relating to the annual grant reward amount for the 2011 Information Referral Network. States intent regarding appropriations, repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 608, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to appropriations. Amends Sections 84612, states legislative intent to transfer and appropriate funds to capital grants, repeals the original section, declares emergency. Legislative Bill 609, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to appropriations. Amends Sections 84612, states legislative intent and transfers appropriate funds for the construction of a memorial, repeals the original section, declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 610, introduced by Senator Lippincott and others, is a bill for an act relating to appropriations, appropriates money to the State Department of Education to fund career and technical education programs and career education student organizations, declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 611, introduced by Senator Reapy, it's a bill for an act relating to Healthcare Facility Licensure Act, amends Section 71475, provides requirements for the healthcare facility provided medications, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 612, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to appropriations, appropriates funds to the Department of Administrative Services, declares emergency. Legislative Bill 613, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to appropriations, amends Section 84612, states legislative intent to transfer and appropriate funds to replace lead service lines as prescribed, repeals the section, declares emergency. Legislative Bill 614, introduced by Senator McDonald, it's a bill for an act relating to appropriations, appropriates funds from the general fund to the Department of Agriculture to test emerging technologies for sustainable irrigation, declares emergency. Legislative Bill 615, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to appropriations, appropriates funds for the Nebraska Opioid Recovery Fund to the State Fire Marshal as prescribed, and declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 616, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to economic development, amends two sections, Section 6841, 84612, states intent to transfer funds to provide duties to the Department of Economic Development to award funds, transfer funds from the cash reserve fund, harmonize provisions, repeal the original section, declare an emergency. Legislative Bill 617, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to economic development, amends sections 84612, transfers funds from the cash reserve fund to create a fund, provides duties for the Department of Economic Development, repeals the original section, declares an emergency. That's all I have this time, Mr. President.
Raise the call. New bills, Mr. Clerk.
Legislative Bill 618, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to labor, amends sections 4109 and 4862804, redefines public benefits as prescribed, changes provisions of the employment security law relating to disqualification of certain aliens, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 619, issued by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to crimes and offenses, amends several sections, prohibits assault on a public transportation driver, changes and eliminates provisions and penalties relating to offenses involving assault of an officer, emergency responder, certain employees, or a healthcare professional, defines and redefines terms, harmonized provisions, repeals the original section, outright repeals section 28-93101. That's all I have this time, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
the last bills and last motions.
Mr. Clerk, introduction of new bills.
Thank you, Mr. President. Legislative Bill 620, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to juveniles. Amend several sections within chapters 43 and 29, changes provisions relating to arraignment of certain juveniles, eliminates an obsolete option to waive a hearing as prescribed, and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 621, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to economic development. Amend several sections within Chapter 81, provides additional use of the Site and Building Development Fund, provides requirements to provide for transfer of the cash fund reserve, harmonized provisions, repeals the original section, declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 622, introduced by Senator McDonald. It's a bill for an act relating to the Sports Arena Facility Financing Assistance Act. Amends several sections in Chapter 13, defines and redefines terms, change provision relating to limitation of state assistance act. Application requirements, harmonized provision, repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 623, introduced by Senator McDonald. It's a bill for an act relating to the Sports Arena Facility Financing Assistance Act. Amends Section 133102, redefines the term and repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 624, introduced by Senator McDonald. It's a bill for an act relating to the Nebraska Visitor Development Act. Amends several sections within Chapter 81, provides for the administration of the Nebraska Tourism Commission as prescribed, provides duties for the Director of Economic Development, eliminates obsolete provisions, changes commissioner duties, harmonized provisions, repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 625, introduced by Senator McDonald, is a bill for an act relating to Nebraska Rules of the Road, amends sections 6601 and 605, defines a term, provides requirements for operation of autonomous vehicles, harmonized provisions, repeals the original section. Legislative Bill 626, introduced by Senator Albright and others, is a bill for an act relating to abortion, amends several sections within Chapter 38, adopts the Nebraska Heartbeat Act, provides for discipline under the Uniform Credentialing Act, harmonized provisions, provides severability, repeals the original section, declares an emergency. Legislative Bill 627, introduced by Senator Bostar, is a bill for an act relating to schools, adopts the Free Student Meals Act, eliminates provisions relating to reimbursement for school breakfast programs, and outright repeals sections 7910, 138, and 139. Additionally, Mr. President, series of motions and amendments. Mr. President, motions to be printed. Senator Hunt, withdraw LB 86. Senator McDonald, LB 109, 158. Senator Brewer, withdraw 251. And Senator Hunt, a motion to IPP Legislative Bill 574 pursuant to Rule 6, Section 3F. And Senator Hunt, IPP Legislative Bill 575 under the same rule. Series of amendments to LB 606 have been filed, as well as LB 626. Notice of committee hearings from the Education Committee, the Urban Affairs Committee, the Health and Human Services Committee. Mr. President, the Performance Audit Committee has selected Senator Jacobson as vice chair. Additionally, Health and Human Services has selected Senator Hardin as its vice chair, and Retirement has selected Senator Ibach to serve as vice chair. Mr. President, the Reference Committee would meet in 1525 now for referencing. Reference Committee 1525 now. And the Rules Committee will hold an executive session in room 1524 at 1:30. Rules 1524, 1:30. Mr. President, series of name adds: Senator Ibach to LB 38, Senator Conrad to 42 and 52, Blood 78, Conrad 91, 99, and 115, Blood to 115 and 123, Conrad to 126, 142, 143, Aguilar to 168, Senator Conrad to 169, 183, 187, 211, and 231, Senator Blood to 232, Senator Aguilar to 249, Senator Conrad to 254, 56, 78, 91, 306, 315, Senator Blood to 315, Senator Conrad to 316, Senator Hughes to 318, Senator Brewer to 322, 323, Senator Blood to 328, Senator Brewer to 332, Senator Blood to 357, Senator Brewer to 385, Senator Frederickson to 419, Senator Blood to LB 500, 519, and LR3CA. Finally, Mr. President, priority motion. Senator McDonald would move to adjourn the body until Wednesday, January 18th at 10 o'clock a.m.
The question is, shall the legislature adjourn for the day? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? The legislature is adjourned.